So, I kinda deleted my game. Hey everyone, I'm Jake, and this is Don't Stop You'll Die Devlog 8. It's been a while since my last devlog, and I've been busy reworking the entire game. I wasn't really happy with how the game was looking and feeling, and pre-Game Expo I was really taking my time with development, making sure everything was well structured under the hood to allow the game to be modular and scalable. But once I got accepted for the expo and had an actual deadline I had to meet, I sort of threw that all out the window and powered through, which meant that when it was all said and done and the expo was finished, the code was a nightmare to work with. Now, I could have gone through everything and tried fixing it, or simply start again, which is what I decided to do. This time around I opted in to use TopDown Engine by More Mountains. For those who don't know, TopDown Engine is the most complete top-down solution for Unity. It's got a super solid modular foundation with game feel and a smooth player experience at its core. Some might argue that by using this framework I'm cheating or not making my own game, and while it does a lot, it doesn't do everything I'd need out of the box. So there still is a heavy amount of coding involved. It took me about a week to get everything implemented from the demo, not balanced of course. I then started adding new things that the previous version just didn't have. First up was loot chests, which will spawn upon completing a room, just as a little something to reward the player. I implemented the weapon loot chest first, which pretty much has a list of possible weapons and their percentage chance to spawn. This chest, as the name suggests, will give the player a new weapon, and some ammo for that weapon as well. I then expanded upon this by adding a generic item chest, which for now would just drop some health and coins for the player. I also gave the enemies the ability to drop ammo on death. This was a bit trickier to implement as I had to get a reference to the player's currently equipped gun through the inventory manager, and then use the breadcrumbs from that to get the ammo type the weapon uses and spawn the corresponding prefab. And while we're on the topic of weapons now using ammo, I want to talk about another big change I'm making to the weapon system in the game. Like I mentioned, I'm using TopDown Engine, and out of the box the weapon system is quite flexible, but I want to expand on that even further. I've decided to make a procedural attachment system for the weapons. I'm breaking the weapon down with 6 different attachment slots: stock, grip, barrel, underbarrel, mag, and scope. Each attachment will affect a different stat such as recoil, bullet spray, ammo capacity, just to name a few examples. I started off by creating the base attachment scriptable object, which contains all of the possible stats that I would want changed, as well as an enum for the attachment type and prefab that will instantiate on the gun. I then got stuck into the actual attachment script. I had an array for each possible attachment and then created a function which would randomly select an attachment from each type and instantiate the corresponding prefab at the correct position. Now every time the scene reloads, you can see the SMG has different attachments. Currently the SMG has 6 attachment slots with 5 variations per attachment, which gives the SMG a stupid amount of combinations. But having all of these attachments is all good and well, but they currently don't do anything, so that was the next thing to do. This was pretty straightforward to do for the most part, but now that it's done, it means the system is nice and solid, and all I need to do now is make a bunch of art for the rest of the weapons. But for the time being, I decided to tweak the visual feedback for the SMG as the default was kind of a lot to look at. So I changed the colour of the particle effects, the flash, and the values for screen shake amongst other things, and it's looking a lot nicer now. The next crucial aspect I wanted to focus on was combat. I felt that in the demo the enemies were stiff and the rooms just felt boring. I started off by somewhat tweaking the values of enemies like health, move speed, and fire rate to try and better balance the difficulty. What I've got is pretty okay for the time being, but I'll be able to further tweak it once I start defining the player stats a bit nicer. And while we're on the topic of it, enemy AI is something I really struggle with, and the enemy AI within TopDown Engine is really flexible in terms of what it can actually do. I spent some time sifting through the demo scenes to see what types of behaviours I could achieve out of the box, and then learned how the enemies worked under the hood, so I could try and come up with some more interesting enemies. I'm going to be sticking with the same enemy types I had in the demo, as well as create a few new mechanically to spice things up. After spending a bit of time smacking my head against a wall, I reached out to a fellow game dev who is familiar with the More Mountains framework and asked him for help. With that, I was able to get a dashing melee enemy working. It was pretty rough around the edges to begin with, but after some tweaking I got it working and I'm really happy with it. The next enemy I added was this enemy that moves in a frenzy towards the player, and once they're close enough to the player will explode, dealing damage within a certain radius. This took a bit of extra work, as this is a custom action for the enemy to perform in the state machine. I created a script for this action and had it inherit from the AI action class. In the perform action function, I essentially set the enemy's health to 0 and then just get it to deal damage within a radius. This brings the total enemy count to 6, which should be enough variety for enemy behaviour to get started. With that being said, they are in no way truly balanced just yet, but it's something I'll be able to chip away at as I continue to develop the game. I then got to work refining the enemy AI a little bit more. For this, I created some AI action extension scripts, as well as a custom pathfinding ability to get the TopDown Engine's enemy AI code working with the A-Star pathfinding project. This, as well as getting the pathfinding grid to scan during runtime to work with the level generation asset, was an absolute hassle to get working, but I got there in the end. I then continued on with more work on the enemies. One thing I love in roguelikes are damage numbers. Firstly, they're a good visual indicator to the player as to how their damage is scaling as they progress through the run, and secondly, depending on how far along in the run you are, how beefy the enemies are, and the damage you're dealing, it can be really satisfying seeing all those numbers pop up, without being too distracting of course. I had these damage numbers in the original Don't Stop You'll Die, and for that I used the damage numbers pro asset, and I'll be using it again for this. Getting it initially set up and tested was pretty straightforward, but that was the extent of it. Getting the numbers to instantiate next to the enemy's health bar and show the correct damage was tricky, but I sifted through the TopDown Engine documentation to get into the nitty gritty of the health code as a refresher, and figure out how to link up all the moving parts between components and assets to get it working. This is what it's currently looking like. There's definitely room for improvement, but I'm really happy with it so far. And lastly, if you didn't already know, Don't Stop You'll Die has a Steam page live now ready for wishlists. So if this is your kind of game, a wishlist would be appreciated. But that's all for this video. If you enjoyed, give the video a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.